Today it appears the treasure of an unaltered landscape is more highly esteemed than that which lies buried beneath the ground. These were the words penned by Powell Greeley in his reflection on the events that took place in the once prosperous mining community in North Bloomfield, California. In the grand scope of history, his statement rings true. Hydraulic mining was a sort of dramatic eclipse in the gold rush. Its height lasted less than a mere 10 years. But for those who remember the roar of the hydraulic monitors, it's still recalled as the golden years, and its loss deeply mourned. Perhaps it all began in 1848 when James Marshall made his infamous gold discovery at Sutter's Mill, sparking a mass migration into California. Among those miners were 2 Irishmen and a German who set up a claim on what's now called Humbug Creek, approximately 3 miles north of its South Yuba River junction. Most miners dreamed of finding what they called the mother lode, the place from which gold originates. For these 3, perhaps it was. So of course, when they sent one of the Irishmen down the hill and into Nevada City for supplies, they swore him to secrecy. But a little libation in him and his lips were loosed. Any miner with an ear to hear was intrigued by his loud boasting of a gold claim with no specified location. So when he headed back up the hill, they followed at a distance. In the early days of mining, it was panning and sluicing that reigned king. And that was how most of the early miners of Humbug Creek reaped their golden treasure. But panning was really only good for finding that surface placer gold, the easy stuff. And the easy stuff ran out quickly, causing the miners to throw up their hands and declare the place a humbug. That is until a man named E. Matson thought to rig a nozzle to the end of a hose in the year 1853. This new method of mining would be both the savior and the death blow to the San Juan Ridge. Using the hose, a miner could direct streams of pressurized water at a hillside, washing the hard-packed ground into mud and gravel, which could then be washed through a sluice to catch the heavy bits of gold dust. The remaining gravel, or tailings as they were called, would continue on to meet their end in the Yuba River. This innovation in mining would come to bear the name hydraulicking. Many small-scale operations of this kind sprang up all over the Sierra Nevadas. By the year 1860, the Humbug mining camp had a population of 600. They applied for a post office just 4 years prior, and their application was granted on the condition that they change their name. And so they settled on the name North Bloomfield, as there was already a Bloomfield near Sonoma. The Nevada County Transcript commented, "North Bloomfield will likely prove no humbug after all." But small-scale operations were costly, and a handful of men operating 1 or 2 hydraulic monitors simply didn't have the means to obtain the water rights necessary to make hydraulicking possible. So the newly formed town of Bloomfield began to fall into decline around 1863. But where some saw a challenge, others saw opportunity. One eager San Francisco capitalist, a far-sighted Frenchman named Jules Pequilion, along with a few of his colleagues, William Ralston, L.L. Robinson, Thomas Bell, William Barron, and R. Bayerke, came together and began buying up idle claims totaling 1,533 acres. And on August 8, 1866, the North Bloomfield Gravel Mining Company, or the French Company, was officially incorporated. By the year 1870, they had obtained majority stock in the Union Gravel Mining Company and a controlling interest in the Milton Mining and Water Company. In essence, the French company had a monopoly over the San Juan Ridge, just what they needed to create a large-scale hydraulic mine. And by 1876, their dream was in full swing. That little 600-member community in North Bloomfield grew to number around 2,000. That same year, the farmers at the base of the ridge were bearing the consequences of the booming industry and decided to take action. In the early 1870s, the Marysville farmers organized the Anti-Debris Association to protest the dumping of hydraulic tailings into the Feather, Bear, and Yuba rivers. By the year 1879, those tailings had raised the bed of the Feather River approximately 3 to 4 feet, and the Sacramento River approximately 5 feet, causing the river to narrow and in some cases flood nearby farmlands. The Anti-Debris Association filed their suit against the California Miners Association in 1876 and renewed their suit in 1881. Under threat to their industry, the miners made attempts to catch the tailings by building restraining dams, but even that wasn't enough. On June 18, 1883, the cry came, "The English dam broke this morning at 5 a.m. Warn everyone along the Middle Yuba River." The following day, the Nevada Daily Transcript reported, "Early yesterday morning, the central section of the English Dam, where the water is stored for summer use by the Milton Hydraulic Mining Company, broke, and the waters of the artificial lake behind it went pouring down the channel of the Middle Yuba River in an irresistible flood that swept away everything in its path, catching up immense boulders and trees and timbers. The stream tore along with a roar that could be heard for miles. Nothing like it was ever before known in the mountains." Some speculated that it was sabotage, a desperate attempt by farmers to draw attention to their plight. But whether it was or wasn't, the following year, in February of 1884, new regulations on hydraulic mining were to take effect. Edward Woodruff, an absentee landlord with holdings in the Yuba farmland, had filed for a perpetual injunction against the French company in September of 1882, and Judge Lorenzo Sawyer of the United States Circuit Court had decided in his favor. This would come to be known as the Sawyer decision. This was a hard hit to the hydraulicking industry, and keeping in compliance proved difficult. In many cases, hydraulic mines acted in defiance of the injunction, operating illegally. The Anti-Debris Association would send spies to see if the mines were complying, but in 1878 the French company and others had set the first long-distance telephone line into place, the Ridge Telephone Line, stretching approximately 60 miles with 22 stations. Its original intent was to alert other mines of breaks in the water supply. Now it found a new purpose in protecting the mines from these spies, or slickers as they called them. They would simply send out the call, "The slickers are coming," and the water supply would be turned off. In extreme cases, they would even send someone to keep the slicker distracted in one of North Bloomfield's saloons. By the year 1890, the North Bloomfield mine, Malakoff Diggins, was the only hydraulic mine still in operation along the San Juan Ridge. And even that came to an end with the Caminetti Act in March of 1893 and the creation of the California Debris Commission. To a degree, the Caminetti Act should have encouraged the farmers as well as the miners. One of its provisions was to aid in the construction of dams and to advise and assist the miner in the proper and lawful conduct of his operation. But it seemed that this would not be. By the turn of the century, hydraulic mining was dead for all intents and purposes, save for a few bootleggers operating by the cover of night. It seems strange that such an incredible industry should have such a short-lived, albeit passionate, existence. Many of the miners held out hope that the Caminetti Act would be their savior and continued to pay taxes on their properties in the North Bloomfield area, believing one day they would resume their operations. Their banner cry was "Live and let live, resume hydraulic mining." But under the Sawyer decision, a line had been drawn. Private rights may not be encroached upon under the guise of miners' customs, even in areas where the statutes recognize the validity of such laws. So the miners made one last attempt at the future of lawful operation. In San Francisco on May 29, 1928, the Commonwealth Club of California facilitated a final discussion between the farmers of Marysville and the hydraulic miners. The hope for both parties was that the Caminetti Act, passed 34 years prior, would be implemented in proper fashion. Under the Caminetti Act, the miners were to pay a 3% tax on their gross output that would be in turn used to pay for the construction of dams to retain the tailings. However, the miners argued that they never saw that return. No dams were built. James Stewart, the miners' representative, stated, "The miner has never fought anything in the way of legislation that would aid farming or any other industry, but he has not received any such treatment in return." The farmers vehemently believed that there was no good that could come from the rehabilitation of hydraulic mining. Old tailings from the days of unrestricted hydraulic mining were still uncontained. Those combined with the natural erosion and new tailings would fill any retention dams constructed faster than anticipated by the miners. To them, rehabilitation was nothing but an experiment that might prove harmful. With no guarantee of success, hydraulic mining finally went out quietly into the night. By the time the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, the McKillican and Mobley General Store in North Bloomfield closed its doors, signaling the end of the dramatic eclipse that was hydraulic mining until the founding of the Malakoff-Diggins State Historic Park in 1966 to preserve the memory of the events for posterity's sake. Today, the town of 2000 has no more than 10 residents, most of them park rangers, who continue to tell the story of that battle cry, live and let live, in the grand debate in environmental history between the miners and the Marysville farmers.